This podcast is brought to you by American Civil War and UK history. This is for the Passion of History podcast. Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Daz. This presentation is available as a video on a YouTube channel or as a podcast from wherever you get your podcast from. And if you're watching on YouTube, remember to hit that subscribe button and give us a big thumbs up. And to keep up to date with everything American Civil War and UK history, and for the Passion of History podcast, head over to our website where you'll find blog posts, podcasts and links to all of our social media pages. The link is available in the podcast description. Now, today's subject is quite a sensitive one, and so if you are easily upset, then now is the time to leave and not carry on listening. We are going to be discussing the concentration camp of Auschwitz and Birkenau. So that entails talking a little bit about the Holocaust and the horrible events behind it. So joining me to do that today is historian from Mark's English History channel, Mark Wheatcroft. Welcome, Mark.
Hi, Dan. Hi, everyone.
Now, the reason we're going to discuss this is because Mark has recently visited, and he was lucky enough to visit quite close to the anniversary of the 80 years of the liberation, which Mark will explain in due course. But first, Mark, can you just explain where the camp is actually located, please, for people that don't know?
So the camp is located in a small Polish town called Oświęcim, I think is the pronunciation. But it's about an hour and a half drive away from the Polish city of Krakow, which is in Western Poland, so it's not too far from the German border, or what was then the German border in 1939 when Hitler's armies invaded Poland, which would be the trigger point for the start of the Second World War. And Krakow is overrun quite quickly in that initial phase of the war. And Auschwitz I, the first concentration camp, which opens fairly soon afterwards, was actually a Polish army barracks that was obviously, as the Polish army retreated in the face of the superior German forces that they were facing, was vacated. So they used a site that was already in place.
Okay. And so when they come across this place, what's the idea straight? Is it they're just going to use it as a base at this point, or is the idea already there to have a camp of this kind?
Concentration camps have already been constructed in Germany. Obviously, by 1939, the Nazi Party has already been in power in Germany for 6 years. They've had at this point numerous. I'll say now I'm not an expert in the Holocaust. My academic side ends at A level at 18 years old, so I'm not an expert at it. So, but the concentration camps start springing up fairly early when the Nazis take power. The first two are at Dachau, just north of Munich, and in a place called Sachsenhausen, which is just outside Berlin. And they're initially housed to concentrate political prisoners of the Nazi regime. So if you know about the Nazis' rise to power, you know at that time it's a battle. Germany was a battleground between left and right. Following the German defeat in World War II, you have a small period of time where there's a successful democratic government known as part of the Weimar Republic. That collapses after the Wall Street crash, where the Americans pull all their funding out of Germany. And so, as what normally happens in those situations, the population starts to splinter between the far right and the far left. Hitler's the most prominent of those, the most powerful, and they win the most votes in the 1933 election, get asked to form that initial government, and then that's when the snowball of the Nazis really gaining power and becoming a dictatorship begins. And one of the first things they start doing is rounding up the enemy, the far left, the communists, and putting them into concentration camps. So when Auschwitz I first opens, it is predominantly as a concentration camp for political prisoners. It does also include those that the Third Reich deem as being part of their subhuman element. So people like Jewish people, disabled people, homosexuals, Catholics are pushed into this category. But at this stage, it is purely a concentration camp. The problem that the Nazis don't perceive is that when in Germany the Jewish population is 1% of the population, when they move into Poland, it's 10%. So suddenly there's a massive increase in numbers, and then you also have to correspond that to once we move on later on, and they move further east with Operation Barbarossa. Eastern European has a high Jewish population, and so they then get swamped in numbers, and that's when more and more camps start to having to be formed.
Okay, yeah, interesting. And obviously, at the beginning as well, there's a lot of ghettos, isn't there, in Poland at first, and that's how the Nazi regime deals with the situation, isn't it? So, I mean, you did visit did you visit a ghetto area when you was in Krakow? Was there one there?
Yes, there is. So in Krakow itself, you've got, first of all, you've got the Jewish Quarter, which is the pre-war or even going earlier on area that the Jewish population lived. And then once the Germans came in, they did create, or the Nazis came in, they did create the ghettos. So this is an area that of the city that the Jewish people were told that they needed to live, and there was a wall placed around it, and you could only leave under certain circumstances. And
Nice.
so
Yeah.
there is actually a little bit in the square, it's or in the area of the ghetto. There's not a lot left. There's a square there where there's a temporary art installation, or not temporary, an art installation with chairs in to represent the people that were the furniture that was left behind by the people when the ghetto was what they call liquidated, which is when the population was forced out and forced to the camps, which at this moment in time is quite pertinent because it had when I went, that all these chairs had the yellow ribbons tied round for the hostages in Gaza. And then if you go towards and there's a small section of the wall still remaining. It's if you go into a kids' park, little play park, and it's just to the right as you walk in. There's this small section of wall that's the last section of wall from the ghetto that still remains.
Okay. So, okay, we do get to that situation where they decide, as you said, and horrible way to put it, I suppose, liquidize or, move these people on from these ghettos. And one of the camps and one of the biggest will grow into one of the biggest is obviously Auschwitz-Birkenau. Now, this picture's, is quite ominous when you think of, and if you're a historian, this is the first thing you're going to think of is this rail track that leads to this, quite imposing looking building, gateway, whatever you want to call it. But you couldn't see it when you went there, could you, Mark? Because it was covered up, wasn't it?
Yes. So my visit was on the Friday, and the 80th anniversary of the liberation was the following Monday. And this gate obviously is the symbol of Auschwitz II-Birkenau camp, known as the Death Gate. And so this was going to be the centerpiece of the commemorations. And obviously with the age of the survivors who were going to be on the site, and the fact that it was January, they had made the decision that a huge marquee would be built that completely covered this to enable to put the seating in, to allow put the podiums in, etc. Because when I was there 3 days beforehand, there was still snow on the ground. It was this winter was very cold, or seemed a very cold winter from a British point being in Poland, but there's snow on the ground. They're they decided to put the tent out, this marquee over to protect the actual ceremony, so that in case, for example, there was a snowstorm or it rained or something like that, the people would be protected.
Yeah. So I've got to ask you, Mark, because again, like I said, this is where, for a lot of people, the train would pull in and families would be separated, people would be separated depending on how fit you were, how old you were, what sex you were, this, that, and the other. And you would end up going through one of those gates. But for you, what was it like standing there seeing? Obviously, I know you didn't see the actual gate, but standing in that place for the first time, what was it like for you? You know, what did it feel like?
It had a eerie feeling. If you've ever, for people who visit historical sites, there's certain sites where as soon as you walk in or go to it, you can feel that history.
Hmm.
Something's happened, and it was definitely, you had that feeling there. Like you say, I didn't get to see this gate, but what was open and what you was able to stand on was the ramp or the platform. So once the train, so this is the entrance gate and the sort of front wall, if you will, of Auschwitz II-Birkenau. And so once the train pulled through that, the train will come through that gate. And like you say about family being separated, sometimes this has already happened. That families had already been separated, relatives had already been killed, had died elsewhere, because often this is the final stop for a lot of the stories. In terms of they've come from other camps to eventually come to here. So in terms of, some families have already been broken up, some relatives have already perished, and so then they go through this gate and then they get up to the platform and that, or the ramp, and then that was sort of one of the more sinister parts of the trip that you
Yeah.
could really, you because what they have around the site is pictures, contemporary pictures showing things that were happening on the spots that you were standing. So this is the ramp here, and so as people were getting off the train, they were split, men one side, women and children the other, and then they walked past the SS doctors, Mengele being one of them, and they would just go that way or that way. And it's, if you looked well enough to work, you went off into the camp, and if you was ill, disabled, a mother with a child, for any reason unfit for what they would deem unfit for work, they went straight down to the chambers.
Yeah, it's horrendous.
So it wasn't even a process to get there, although they'd already possibly been through
Hmm.
the other camps. It was just on that one look, you're going over there to work, you're going to the chamber.
Yeah.
And so, although this picture here, this was taken inside one of the rooms at Auschwitz I, because Auschwitz I is the ex-army barracks. That's all brick buildings, so a lot of it remains. Whereas in Auschwitz II, Birkenau, they were wooden buildings. So only really now do like it's like chimney stacks and small foundations that remain. So the museum per se is in Auschwitz I, but it does show elements of both camps. But
Hmm.
the same photograph is on a board at the ramp. So where
That
you're
must be quite
standing,
powerful to see that and then be standing in that same spot where
it
so many lives were decided over just literally how you were, you know, and it's horrible.
it is the interpretation, the way that the museum and the memorial site do the interpretation with the pictures is very good, because it does give you that element of being able to you're standing on the point that this took place, and
Yeah.
it showed by having those photos around the site showing that it does allow you to see it. Whereas sometimes you go to a historical site, like you go to a battlefield or something like that, and it's lovely rural countryside, and you don't sometimes it's hard to understand or put into a picture of what it was like then
Hmm.
and what happened. So the way that they've got these boards up around with these pictures on does really illustrate those points, and it brings it home to you that what occurred there.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to. So again, here's another. I think this is the one you was talking about, is
That
it? Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
the same is it the same picture or very close to the same
But
picture.
you come in and you're surrounded by these fences, and I mean, I just can't even imagine what these people. I mean, what were these people told, or what were they? Where were they told where they were going, or you know?
So that in terms of obviously where what I told where they were going at the start of the journey, probably not. They were probably just being told you're being moved to another camp or you're being taken somewhere. Once they got to this point on the ramp and what they called the selection, if you weren't selected to work, so if you were selected to go to the chambers and to be killed or to be executed, murdered, they were told that they were going to go for shower for disinfection. Now, bearing in mind that in some cases, I'm not sure if I sent you the picture of it, but in Auschwitz I, in one of the first buildings you go into, there's a map of Europe under occupation, and it shows where Auschwitz is almost at the center of the maximum reach of the Nazi Empire from the French coast on the Atlantic through to the point where the Red Army stopped them in Russia. And so some of these people have been on trains for days, weeks. And so when they're then told they're going for a shower for disinfection, I think like for most people it makes sense.
Hmm.
So it's almost like this calculated thing of what if you've been stuck in a train, and these trains
Yeah, they were rams, weren't they?
they're cattle carts, they're box
Yeah.
cars. You know, they're not. You're not getting on a train
And
with
they wasn't sitting down either. They was literally
no.
just shoved in.
They were standing up, full
Hmm.
standing up. Um, People had already died in those carriages, in those box cars. So this calculation of okay, you're going down there and it showers, it's disinfection. Probably most people will be happy to go and take a shower
Hmm.
if you've been on a train for 5 days stuck in those conditions, and you're told you're going to have to go and have a shower for disinfection. You're not gonna. There's not gonna be an argument in a way.
Ah,
So even to that point of what they're told at the point of selection when they're being marched off to the chambers is calculated to not alleviate fears, because obviously there will be fears within the situation that these people find themselves in, but there's a calculation there of what the people expect.
mm.
So even to that point, you're seeing that this is meticulously planned by the Nazis, and that every step of it has been thought out by them.
I just want to bring one thing up myself, and something I've always thought about. Now, obviously, the guards in most of these camps are, and again, they've got weapons, I know, but are completely outnumbered by the amount of people that come through. But then I suppose they wouldn't have been able to do anything anyway. But was there any resistance towards the movement of people in any of these journeys?
So this is where
And they wouldn't have had a chance anyway, would they, I suppose?
No, so this is where Holocaust and genocide becomes a real tricky subject because to talk about. So, in terms of within the camp, there is a rebellion. In terms of what they call the Sonderkommandos. So these are prisoners, people that are in the camp, Jewish political prisoners that are then working for the SS. So, for example, their job is to clear and clean out the crematoriums, for example. And towards the end of the camp's time, so late 44, as the Red Army sort of starting to close in, they blow up one of the crematoriums in an attempt to start a uprising. But that's very swiftly and harshly put down, because bearing in mind that the guards, the SS guards, death's heads, are the worst of the Nazis.
Right, so they choose. So the people that are in charge of these camps, because I've always thought, what kind of mental, because humans are not built for this kind of horror, and so you must already have. I don't know how to word it. You must already be sort of that way inclined of thinking if you're going to be taking charge of places like this and mass extermination.
Yeah, so bear in mind that when Auschwitz II opened in 42, the Nazis have been in power for 9 years. And as soon as they come into power, they start things like Hitler Youth. So the indoctrination of the guards has been a long-term process as well.
So it's embedded in their sort of ideology and the way they think, I suppose.
Yeah, it's so the racism is embedded, their thought process that Jewish people are subhuman, disabled people are subhuman, the superiority of the Aryan race has been embedded in every aspect of their lives to that point.
Mm.
So through school, through Hitler Youth, etc. And obviously the initial success of the German military, whether that's the Wehrmacht and the SS, or the SS, the military arm of the SS, the Waffen SS, in the early part of the war, 39 to 42, for example, almost for them would underpin it, because with ease they've walked across Europe and conquered Europe. And so that would, if you've been told all the way through your childhood that you're part of this master race, and then when you're then sent on this war of conquest, you conquer everywhere there is to conquer, bar in Britain, basically, and a large chunk of the USSR, because that's just too big to conquer. It's only going to reinforce your ideology. Mm-hmm. But obviously you do get, there was a program I was watching, I can't remember what it was now, and it was talking about the early part of the Holocaust after Barbarossa, and one of the reasons why, because you started off, you had the Einsatzgruppen, which is SS soldiers,
so the death squads, yeah,
and that they just go around, they'll pull out the people that they want, that they've selected, stand them in a pit and murder them with machine gun fire. And one of the reasons why they start moving over, or they start looking at another way to do the exterminations, is because the psychological impact that this is having on the Einsatzgruppen.
Yeah.
And so
But
that,
they come desensitized from it, really, in a way.
yes, but, and then that's when they start looking at
Yeah,
other ways, and that, and just the numbers. There's just too many.
yeah.
They can't do it that way. They needed to find another way.
Yeah. And again, going back to your point there, there's a great documentary on Netflix. I don't know whether it's available in the US, but it's in the it's called Ordinary Men, and it is about that. And yeah, they mention that, I mean, psychologically they had, like, the reason they moved from that to that is because of, they're worried about the psychological effects on their soldiers, which is just, horrid. The whole thing's horrid. Anyway, so yeah, let's get back to your pictures, Mark. So here's a few more of some of the signs and boards that you took some pictures of. So what's going on in these pictures?
So this is showing the various stages of the the roundup of the people that will be transported to the camps, the different types of people that were going to be going. So yeah, what you get there again? This is in Auschwitz I, and it tells you that the story of the Holocaust within Poland, and how it moves from they started with the movement into the ghettos, and then the movement from there to the camps, and then again in 42 the building of Auschwitz II-Birkenau, the extermination camp. So murders and gassing occurs in Auschwitz I as well, but Auschwitz II is the main site for the murders and the extermination, and it comes in 42 because of the invasion of the USSR. So this is the gas chamber in Auschwitz I, and then the crematoriums next door. There's no surviving ones in Auschwitz II. There is, I did send you on the photos I sent you, there all of them were destroyed, because when the Red Army was approaching Auschwitz, especially Auschwitz II, the Nazis cleared it. So anybody that basically they couldn't gas, they marched off. Most of them didn't survive the march, obviously, because of the physical state that they were in. And the gas chambers and crematoriums in that camp, there was 4 of them, I believe, 4 or 5, one was already destroyed because of the Sonderkommando uprising, but the rest of them were destroyed by the SS to cover, to destroy the evidence.
Now,
basically.
I don't want to go too deep into, the process, but so they would have been crammed into here, gassed, and of course they would have all died. Who was tasked with moving the bodies to the crematorium, and then obviously moving the ashes? Because we're talking a lot of so how many people would they cram in here at one time?
I don't know on numbers.
No.
The average of were in there. They estimate, and it's only an estimation because we just don't know. There was no records weren't kept because records is
everything. Well, they destroyed a lot of their records as well, didn't they?
Yeah, they estimate 1 million people were murdered over the 2 sites.
Wow.
Of Auschwitz-Birkenau. So this would have been the Sonderkommandos. So these are prisoners. I don't really know the word, possibly. People that were detained within the camp. It was those people that were put. There was a select group of them who worked for the SS doing this job, and they would do that because they will get preferential treatment. They'd get better. They'd get better, a bit more food. Possibly if they've got families in there, they know that they'd sort of be maybe a little bit looked after, a bit better, sort of be given slightly easier jobs if they're working. So there's obviously a but yeah, so these were people that actually these weren't SS men that did this. These were prisoners, detainees of the camp.
And so once they've gone into a crematorium and been, destroyed, what would they do with their ashes? Where would they put it all?
It so fertilizer.
Hmm.
Um, fertilizer would be one. There's pits located where it was sort of they were thrown into water and it dissolved. Actually, I didn't take a picture of it, but in Auschwitz I, there's a large urn, and to give you a rough size, I'd say it's probably about sort of the size of the FA Cup
Yeah.
in size, and it's full of ashes that were discovered. And so it's all just been put in with one urn, and it's in there in the
Mm.
museum. So to give you sort of an idea of just the accumulation of ash.
And then just one more question about this side of things. Do people in the other camp know what's going on over in the other camp?
No,
So they're closed off from it. They don't have a clue that. I mean, because I think they could probably smell the crematoriums, couldn't they? I suppose.
yeah, but they're quite a distance away still.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, they are quite a distance away. Ne they're not next to each other, per se. Like, um, and also you've got the town nearby. So whether the people in the town would know what's going on.
Okay.
Um,
Let's talk
but
about. So this is the other camp, is it now?
so this is Auschwitz one.
So this is where people. So Auschwitz one is sorry because so which one's the camp where you'll go to? You won't come back from, and what's the one where you would stay and be a prisoner?
Well, both of them.
Both of
To
them.
be, hon-
Oh, so it's sort of separated up. Okay.
to be honest, both of them, if people that went in stood very little chance of getting out, coming out. Auschwitz one is the first one. This is the ex-army barracks.
Right, I see. So that's why it's brick built and it's
Yeah,
so
it,
these are all those buildings.
be, yes, because it's a repurposed site.
Yeah.
So it's bit, but bearing in mind though that you are still looking approximately 1,000 people per block
Wow.
in there. In each block. So that's a crematorium.
Oh, sorry. I've got all my. I'll go back. Sorry.
Yeah. So you're looking at approximately 1,000 people per block in there. So it's overcrowded. There's very little hygiene. Disease would be rife. Um, it's in this part. What like both it happens in both camps, but the medical experiments are taking place.
Yeah.
False sterilization is taking place, and experiments around sterilization. And so, but this site just isn't big enough to cope, and
No.
that's why they build the other site. But like I say, it
I
does.
have got a picture of the sleeping arrangements somewhere. We have to sort of. There we go.
Yeah. So this is the sleeping arrangements in. This is Auschwitz II.
Okay, so this is. But is it similar sleeping conditions in that other one in the more sort of like army block barracks?
No, because so there's various arrangements of it. So when you go through the blocks, there's some of them are open. You walk through and they've got it laid out.
Hmm.
So it starts off obviously as the numbers start increasing, it changes. So it starts off that it's just matting on the wooden floor on the floorboards, and then it moves to bunks and sort of bunks that are 3 to 4 high. But these ones, I think they said about 60 people would be sleeping on them
Oh, no.
in there, and the the fittest, the strongest would always sleep on the top
Right, yeah.
because because you wouldn't want to sleep on the bottom because of bodily fluid and things like that coming down.
Yeah, so again, the conditions were absolutely appalling, weren't they? I mean, there was no sanitation or anything, was there?
No.
I'll skip back through the slides there because I didn't do any put any order to these. Now, let's go back to this. So you said this is one of the crematoriums. So this is so where is this one located, Mark?
So this is where I took the picture of inside the gas chamber.
Yeah.
If you do a 180-degree turn, that's the same picture the other
So they're
way.
really close together. So
There, there,
it's
there'd be a door that would
yeah.
seal. They'd do the murders would take place. The gas would, the time would allow, so the victims would be forced into the door between the chamber and the crematorium would be closed and sealed. The victims would be forced in from the other end. That door closed and sealed. The gas part or the particles that would, when contacted with air, would be dropped in, and the chimney. I'm not the vent that it would be placed in would be sealed as well. And then once it was in for a certain period of time, I believe it was about 20 minutes or so, the vents would be reopened to allow the gas to vent out into the natural air, at which point the door to the crematorium would be open and the victims' bodies will be removed and then cremated. But what you've got there and what you can see there is that it would only take one body at a time.
Yeah.
And so this is why they built, there's a need to build the second camp and
Right, I get you now. Yes, it makes sense. Yeah.
The industrial crematoriums.
So
the numbers start
were these cremation units, whatever you want to call them, already? Well, they wouldn't have already been there, but because they look like ovens, don't they? You know.
Yeah. So these weren't there as part. This was built
as an extra. Yeah.
Post 39. So this isn't part. This isn't part of the Polish barracks.
No.
This comes after.
Yeah. Okay. Well, again, it's just awful. And again, standing there looking at this, especially standing in the gas chamber itself, must have been horrendous.
Yeah, it is. Like the tour, you do get whizzed around quite quick.
Mm-hmm.
So there are times where sort of I felt that you could have done with it being a little bit slower.
Yeah.
But there's so many thousands of people that visit every day. It has to move, otherwise it'll.
Yeah, it'd stop. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, there were times when you sort of think like you just needed sort of a couple of minutes yourself, just to stand there and
take it in. Yeah. That's what I'd be like. Okay, so this really brings it home. So there's parts of the museum, isn't there, which show you the left. You know, these is people's belongings and shoes. You know, how powerful is that? And I think there's one with glasses and hair and all sorts of other stuff, isn't there?
This is the most powerful part I felt.
Yeah,
seeing these items, because, like I say, I'm not an expert in this. But I studied it up to A level. I bought some books when I was there, sort of a bit more academic, to sort of have a read of it from a more academic point of view. But where where my passion lies, the stuff what I do study is the First World War. When you go to the battlefields, you see the cemeteries, you see these memorials with all these names on, and that brings it home. But because of the amount of numbers that are there, how do you get your head around 1 million people? You can get your head around if you go to, say, the Tietval Memorial on the Somme, it's 60,000 names on there that have got no known grave. Well, I look at that through the prism of football. 60,000,
Yeah,
that's
the
what
stadium. Yeah,
that's what the London Stadium holds.
yeah,
So I can visually in my head, I can visualize what 60,000 people look like because I look at my football team stadium or Old Trafford, or how do you do that with 1 million people? And so it's when you start seeing all of these shoes, all of these glasses, all the prosthetics, all of these different personal items that people have left. And in some cases, that's that's the only thing that ever shows that that person was on the
yeah.
earth. Because in most cases, the entire family is executed. No family ever. A lot of these families, no one survives.
Mm.
So when you start thinking about, say, for example, the Great War, which is the biggest single event, loss of life event that us in Britain know, have in our history, most families, there's of that. If you look at that generational line that goes to war in 1914 to 1918, most families have survivors. But with this, no one survived.
Yeah, quite harrowing, really.
Yeah.
Again,
And I think again it was on a program or something I read, so I can't quote I can't provide the provenance of where it came from.
yeah,
But in the 80 years since, the Jewish population of Europe still hasn't reached the level it was pre-Holocaust.
yeah,
And then obviously you also have to bear in mind that that's not just, you've also got to bear in mind when you think about the children that were murdered, it's also the loss of life that would follow that.
yeah. So it's generations are wiped out, aren't they?
Yeah,
Mm.
and also, but remember that you've got that next generation, that 56 born in the 1950s, 1960s, that doesn't exist.
Yes.
And that's, you have, when you think of the numbers, you sometimes don't think of that either. The sort of that
No.
knock-on effect of the following generations of the survivors or the victims, the children that they would have had and their families. So yeah, it's
Yeah. So the image we have up now is some photographs of some of the inmates, or if you want to call them that, prisoners, um, all males. But yeah, so just tell us a little bit about this. Is that obviously located in a museum as well? And
again, this is located in the museum. This is one of the corridors. And you walk down and there's just pictures after picture.
yeah,
So again, it's
it
one of
brings
the
it
ones
home,
that,
doesn't it? Because it's a real photograph as well. So it's the real,
yeah, yes, it's actually a photo. You're looking at a person
yeah,
where sometimes amongst the numbers you lose track of the individual when there's that many.
hmm
But by having the pictures there, it does bring it home.
Very, very powerful. Some more. So this is the second camp, is that right?
This is some of the few brick buildings in Auschwitz II. Auschwitz, a lot of the wooden buildings were pulled down quite early after the war, after the liberation, because as people started to move back to, a lot of people were displaced by the Nazis to build these camps and to put an air, almost like an exclusion zone around them, so people didn't know what was going on. So while after the liberation, after the end of the war, people started to come back, and the local populace would dismantle a lot of the buildings for the materials.
Yeah, of course.
So when you look at the other side of the ramp, and you just see the chimney stacks, that's where the wood went to make temporary houses for people who were displaced during the war, returning home.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Mark, what's this?
So that's the exit to the gas chamber and crematorium.
Okay, so that was from the first one, yeah.
Auschwitz I, yes.
Yeah, okay. And again, it's awful looking. I mean, I know it's horrible anyway, but it's just an awful, eerie looking place, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about this. So what is this for?
So this is outside the entrance to the gas chamber of Auschwitz I. And just if you was to stand with your back to that and look to the right, there's some trees, and if you look through it, you could see the house that the commander of the camp lived in. And he was one of the few Nazis who was caught after the war and tried. I believe it might have been Nuremberg, or it might have been a different trial. Found guilty, sentenced to death. And he was sentenced to death by hanging. And this is the gallows that was built, and he was hung outside the entrance to the gas chamber.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so that still remains. So if you want to just skip back one.
Oh, sorry.
So this is Auschwitz II. This is looking from the ramp into that section of the camp, and hopefully you can just see.
You can just see all the chimney stacks.
The chimney stacks, but nothing else. Yeah. So that's it gives you an idea of just how huge the site.
Yeah, the scale is. I suppose if you're actually standing there, it's even more powerful.
Yes. So yeah, if you skip onto that next slide. So this is the remains of one of the gas chambers and crematoriums of Auschwitz II. So the large scale ones that were built, one of the four.
So they basically all got destroyed, did they? Those ones?
Yes, yeah, they were all blown up.
It was all an attempt to cover up what they were doing.
Yes,
once the Allies,
because once you see something like that, what was it?
Yeah, exactly. You can't tell. Yeah.
No, so yeah, it was it was blown up when the camp was evacuated, shall we say? Forced evacuation of the camp at the beginning to mid January 1945. So it was, and this is a model of the chamber.
Oh, okay.
Again, it's in Auschwitz I because the way the memorial site.
So it's basically showing you the process of what.
Yeah. So
what he went through. Yeah.
So at the top level, you're looking at the far end of the ramp.
Yeah.
So the ramp platform from the train. So if you go all the way back to earlier in the discussion, that photo where the selection was taking place on the platform, if you was the victims that would be sent to the gas chamber would come all the way along the platform, come down, come come underneath, come downstairs, go underground. There'd be an area where, for want of a better word, a changing room, where they would be where they'd strip, leave all their belongings, and then they'd move into or most of their belongings will be left up on the platform, but strip, leave the clothes, shoes, etc. In this area before then they'd be moved into the gas chamber, and then from there into the once the murders have taken place, they would then be moved in. The Sonderkommandos would then carry out the cremation. So in this picture, again, if you're watching it on the if you're listening to this on the audio only, what you see here is again the underground gas chamber, and then the remains being brought up into the crematorium, which is above ground.
Yeah, so these are sort of, so there's models. This is also in the museum. These models are located, yeah.
Yeah, in Auschwitz I.
Yeah. So, and
because,
again, it gives you that idea of like trying to vision it. Yeah, it must be hard to vision. Like when some, because there's not, like you said, there's not a lot of it left.
Because it's been destroyed. You can't tell what it is, especially when I went with it covered in snow.
And the fact that it was destroyed, was there still plans knocking around of the buildings or layout, blueprints or anything like that?
I don't know. I don't know how they've come about these models. I can only presume that it's a mixture of. I can't imagine there being plans being left. I didn't see any plans in the museum from memory. Because you'd imagine that something like that would have been in the museum as well. I think you're probably looking at a mixture of archaeological evidence in terms of what remains, and testimony from people who were there, whether that is survivors who saw, because obviously if you're a survivor who was in the camp, may have seen the building of the crematorium at the back, not knowing what it was, but it was there. There were Sonderkommandos that survived long enough to probably give accounts. That SS officers were captured and gave accounts.
Yeah.
So
they would have got the information from that. Yeah.
There's probably enough information out there, but through various sources to come up with a rough idea of what it was, how it was built.
Yeah.
And the construction.
And so we get on to this now. So what does this represent? Is this a memorial of some kind? Or?
No, so this was the death wall in Auschwitz I.
Wow.
So the building, as you're looking at it now, the concrete bricks is where the firing squads will take place. The building to the right is, I think it was block 11, it might have been. And it's the prison within the prison.
Yeah. So why? So if they're sending people to a chamber, why do they need firing squads?
This is earlier.
Oh, okay. So this is pointing back to before they decide to start ramping it up.
Yeah. So this is, like I say, the block to the right is the prison within the prison, so to speak. It's a disciplinary block within the larger camp. And so this would be for, like I say, earlier, 1939, 1942, when, for example, one of the inmates has assaulted an SS guard, for example. Death by firing squad.
Yeah.
So
any punishment would basically be met with severe
Yeah,
punishment, and that is
so
this.
you couldn't take, there's certain areas that you can't take photos in, and the basement of Block 11 is one. And in one of the areas you go into, it's what they call a standing cell,
Yeah,
and it's still there to look at in part. And basically, if you were if you were given time in there, you had to crawl in at the bottom, and then it was enough room to stand up, and
right.
that's it. And so there was various areas that certain areas that they don't let you take photos, and that's one. The basement of Block 11 is one of them. But yeah, this is the execution wall
Okay.
from that earlier stage. So you would have had sort of, like, for example, Anzac Group and things like that.
And
Executions there.
well, that's sort of like the end of the slides, but obviously I'd like to, talk about, again, how it was for you visiting this harrowing place, and just try and put a bit of perspective on it, and if because again, the idea behind keeping it standing, was there no like objection of it, because it's a place of evil, but also it's a place of that people can go and visit to remember, the horrors that went on there. What's your view on the camp? Did they, was there a debate on whether to keep it standing or knock it down, maybe? Or
I don't know too much about the history post-war, post-liberation. I do know that, say, there's several camps within what is today Poland that did that things have gone, were knocked down, forested. So Treblinka, for example, uh, there's some memorials there, but none of the buildings survive. There's another camp in in the city area of Krakow now, and that, again, memorial and a park there. I think it was, but at the same time, like you say, it's a place of evil, but opening it as a museum, and the museum almost opened as a museum almost straight away.
like
Um,
straight after?
yeah,
Yeah.
and because obviously Poland falls under Soviet
Soviet rule.
influence
Yeah.
in the Cold War, so you have this other element whereby one dictatorship's almost replaced by another, and so, but the one that replaced it is the liberator, and so they use it as a political tool
I see. Yeah.
to push their agenda. But I think that places like that, it does need to stand,
hmm Just so you
because
can understand and
so
go
that there
there.
is
Yeah.
somewhere to remember and to educate. Because if those places, if they were if they were knocked down, if they were returned to a natural state, or where where do we go?
Yeah.
Ha,
And
ha, where does that, what anchors the history?
do you know what makes me laugh is, obviously with a lot of this stuff being remembered lately with the anniversary and everything, there's a lot of people that deny that any of this stuff happened, and I just think, and again, like you just said there, having somewhere like this is like the evidence in a way. Look at this place. If you think it doesn't exist, well, I'm afraid it does, and these things happened. And again, like you said, we have to learn from history, and sometimes you have to have a place to be able to do that.
When I did my small section teaching, I have to admit it was the hardest subject to teach. Yeah, it's because of the Holocaust denial area. It's very, very hard to come up with a different, any form of different interpretations over, like, the minutiae at times.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hate talking about
Uh,
Holocaust.
yeah. So, like I said, summarizing it and summing up your experience. Sorry, from visiting again. And would you recommend that other people go and visit this site and, you know,
Yeah, well, Krakow's a real it, Krakow and Auschwitz as a whole is very well worth it because you've got the Jewish quarter in Krakow's. Krakow's a lovely city to begin with. Really interesting city to because it falls quite quickly in 1939, and then the Soviets take it back in, or when the Soviets come through, the Germans have already evacuated. It doesn't suffer in the same way that a lot of Eastern European cities had suffered during the Second World War. So it is a very historical city. So it's a lovely city to visit. You've got the old Jewish quarter, which is close by which is quite near to the city centre as well. The hostel I stayed in was sort of sandwiched between the main city centre, the old town, and the Jewish quarter. So it was really nice to go for a walk around there. You've got the area that had the where the ghetto was, and near to there is Schindler's factory as well.
yeah,
And within that is now the Museum of Krakow, or Poland and Krakow under occupation. So that tells the whole story, the whole experience of the city under occupation. So if you don't know too much about it, that combination of all those elements really add to it. And the only thing I wish I'd have done on my trip was do the Jewish Quarter and Schindler's Museum before I did Auschwitz, because I did the old town, then I went to Auschwitz, and then I did Schindler's Museum, the ghetto, and then the Jewish Quarter was I was flying out mid-afternoon, so I had a free morning, and because it was so close to the hotel, my hostel, it was check out, leave my bag, go for a walk around there for a couple of hours before it's time to go home. So if I did it again, or if I'm recommending it to someone, I'd say make Auschwitz the last stop of that four pieces,
right.
because I think you then if you don't know too much about it, if this is sort of like you're going there to learn it, especially that museum will give you a good insight.
Okay, so it gives you a bit more perspective to the story and
Yeah. So for example, when you go to the Jewish Quarter, there's a few synagogues you can go in, and one of them has got the old Jewish cemetery at the back, and there's what they call the Wailing Wall. But what it was is, when with the persecution of the Jewish population throughout the period of occupation, a lot of headstones have been destroyed, and the wall they'd built a wall, but on the fascia side of the wall for the cemetery, they've used the remnants of these destroyed headstones as tiling, and then they use it as a prayer wall. And I felt like seeing something like that was really moving.
yeah, okay. Well, thanks, Mark. I really appreciate coming on talking about your experience. And yeah, um, and it's something that I'm looking to undertake myself now, and that's because of yourself. So you'll be sending me some tips via WhatsApp
Yeah,
during the next couple of weeks. But all that is left to say, ladies and gentlemen, is thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate you coming on, mate.
no problem.
Go and check out Mark's English History channel. You'll find him on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, it's all ground to a halt a little bit at the minute.
Yeah, I understand. But have
As,
you got any videos that you haven't edited up yet, or that you
yeah,
plan to release out?
I've got a few edited. So this is how far behind I am. Last May I went to Waterloo, in Belgium. Obviously Napoleonic reenacting is my thing. I'll be out there in the summer doing the 200th, 210 now, blimey.
Yeah,
Yeah, so be out there for 210. But I've got a couple of videos. One's already out, which was the Walking Quatre Bras. I've got Walking Water, or the whole series is Walking Waterloo, but the I've got the grand tour of the Waterloo battlefield. I've got my little list here,
yeah,
of the ordering. So hopefully I can get that
yeah. And you've
edited.
got some great World
Yeah,
War One sites as well that you've got in a little while back, haven't you? So, yeah,
yeah. No, I've got the Somme. I went to the back to the Somme again in October, and I've got beginning of April. Back out in Ypres,
oh, nice.
doing
Yeah,
some filming. What I'm doing with that, I think off the top of my head, because I like doing walk. I've got some books, walking battlefields walks,
hmm,
and then I'll just film that. But I think what I'm going to do with Ypres this time, because it's such a confusing, it's a 4 year period of battles over the same ground. It gets really confusing. So I think that this time the focus will be on the first battle, the one in 1914. And then do another one. Then another trip will be 1915, and then another one will be 1917.
nice. Anyway, all that is left to say, ladies and gentlemen, is cheers.
No problem. Thank you. See you later.